Okay, can you hear me? It's four. Yeah, I'm sitting here if I'm tired. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for your presence here for this very exciting news session on cultural heritage and climate risks, putting Copernicus Earth observation data to work in the Mediterranean region. We have a very nice panel here, which I would like to introduce. And the panel is in the first place here, Graminos Mastroianni. He's Union for Mediterranean Senior Deputy Secretary General. Then we also have George Kramlis. He's the chair of the Greek initiative at the European Union on the protection of cultural and national heritage. We also have Karina von Schuckmann. She is oceanographer working for the Copernicus Marine Service implemented by Mercator Océan International. And Carlo Buontempo, he's a director of Copernicus Climate Change Service. After the panel discussion, we will have a short visual to show the potential added value what we provide, and then the audience will also have time for questions and answers. Before I start, I would like to give the floor to Graminos so he can do an official opening from the Union for the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Steen. Maybe I would ask my colleagues to raise the volume of the podium microphone because it was not too loud. We are in front of something that is happening quickly. We've been discussing for years and years and years. Now it is time to take action. When we think about the impacts of climate change, the first images that come into our mind are very concrete impacts: agriculture, housing, infrastructures. But we cannot forget that climate change is also a cultural challenge. I'll give you an idea of what's happening in our region, in the Mediterranean. The second fastest warming region of the world. Connected to this measurement, you have some forecast of impacts which are quite disquieting. Very rapid sea level rise that could salinize coastal lands, or 250 million people in water scarcity in some 15 years. Of course, all this is threatening. But if we start considering all these threats as a collection of problems, we don't really get the picture. What is happening here is that the cultural balance of our region is at stake, and this could produce a lot of instability. If you think about Europe and you just take one step backwards, you might realize that this idea is kind of strange. We should not exist. Geographically, we are just the western tip of Asia. But still we consider ourselves a continent, a reality apart. Because of our cultural identity, because of some way to do things. If you think of the northernmost rim of Africa, overlooking the Mediterranean, is the same. It's Africa, but in a certain way, it's not Africa. So, what makes this difference? There are many historical reasons, but already Montesquieu, when he elaborated his climate theory, he pointed out that what makes ourselves what we are is a certain special climate. We are what we are because we benefited of the one climate that allowed the most important revolution in human history, which is not the Industrial Revolution and not the French Revolution, it's the Agricultural Revolution. It happened around the Mediterranean because we had a special climate that allowed it. A sea that had a stabilizing function that made climate cycles predictable. So that if you have predictability of climate, you can start thinking about planning the use of territory, agriculture, and things like that. So what's happening now? Climate is posing a cultural threat. The culture that united Europe, and in turn Europe with southern Mediterranean, in this historical circulation, has this climate basis, but this climate basis does not exist anymore. Our region, which was unified, is now broken in two. And this might seem a kind of intellectual exercise, but it brings with it some very concrete consequences. I'll give you an idea. Now the climate of Europe is being broken in two parts. It means that on the north, they're experiencing new interests that start to diverge from the interests of the south. For instance, the fastest warming area in the world, we are the second, is the Arctic. It means that Arctic navigation routes will be available quite soon. And we are happy if our northern friends have some advantages together with all the problems. But if these routes become available, it means that the Suez Canal loses all its value. So there is a lot of divisive pressure against which we need to cling to our identity. It is essential. If we let these trends have their effects without control, without integrating them into an awareness-informed policy, it will lead us to divide, it will lead us to compete. We need to remember who we are and why we are and what unites us against this new contingency. Now, culture has its own non-material substance, but can we really defend this non-material substance if we abandon the physical testimonies of what it means? In this perspective, action, no words anymore, together with Copernicus, ECMWF, we joined hands and we decided that we should do something. We are a political organization, so let me say, we are very much inclined, instinctively inclined to blah, blah, blah. But we have some friends, and they have an asset which tends to be valued more and more, which is called data. They know what's happening, but in turn, they have a problem. They know it so well that only very few people understand it. It is difficult, if you go onto a Copernicus webpage, to get the synthetic meaning of all those precise measurements. So we joined hands and we decided in this sector to start with, and then in other sector, we should turn this huge, how would I say, value of knowledge into something which is useful. And we thought, what should we start with? The instinct was, let us start with agriculture, let us start with housing, these things that are so normal, but then we thought, there is a value underneath which is at stake, culture, and this is why we joined hands. And this is why we're so proud today to launch this new experimental web instrument, an application intended to give to operators present, past, and future trends in threats for cultural heritage on the coastline, especially brought and caused by climate change. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much, Kraminos, for this very nice introduction and these insights for the Mediterranean. So let's now go to the panel, and I have three panelists, George, Grina, and Carlo. And I also invite later on, and I use the presence of our colleague from UNESCO to share also a few words afterwards. But let me first go to George with a question. George, can you explain our audience Greece-specific coordinated activities at the United Nations level and share your views on the importance of international networks to facilitate the exchange of knowledge?
Yes. Thank you very much, Steen. Let me first say that I am very happy to be part of this panel. I would like to thank the Mediterranean Pavilion. I would like to thank Gramenos and the UFM, and of course Copernicus and the ECWMF for this synergy, which is very beneficial to what we are doing as the Greek initiative at United Nations level to address climate change impacts on cultural and natural heritage. An emblematic initiative that we are running together with UNESCO, and I'm very happy to see here the representative, the head of UNESCO in Egypt, in Cairo, Nuria Sanz, with the World Meteorological Organization and with UNFCCC, supported by more than 100 countries of the United Nations. And I'm also very happy to welcome the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Climate, Mr. Petros Varelidis, who is instrumental in our initiative, but also in what Greece is doing to address climate change in terms both of mitigation and adaptation. He's the father of the ambitious Greek climate law, and we are really very happy to have him with us. Let me add to the words of Gramenos Mastrogianni that this synergy between UFM, Copernicus and the ECWMF, together with the Greek initiative, is extremely important because it will provide us with the scientific tools. We need a knowledge-based approach to be able to take informed decisions as regards mitigation. And of course here we are in the adaptation / resilience area to protect our cultural and natural heritage. And in that respect, having open and credible environmental and climate data, and in particular benefiting from this application, which will give us projections up to 2050, taking into consideration the past, the present, and the future trends. It is extremely important, in particular for the level of the sea rise, because here, and we are very happy for that, in the video you will see the island of Delos. Delos is part of our both cultural and natural heritage, because islands, and the Greek initiative covers also islands, even islands which do not have a cultural heritage. And who doesn't have a cultural heritage? Because cultural heritage are not only the monuments as we know them, the Acropolis, the Colosseum, other important monuments. It is also the traditions. Culture should be conceived lato sensu, in the broadest possible sense. But those islands, and in particular the islands of the Pacific and the Indian, threatened because of the sea rise, and I refer to Tuvalu, for example, are also part of our natural heritage, part of our planet. And in that respect, the Greek initiative covers also the islands. Yesterday we had an event on greening the islands. Greece had it organized in the EU pavilion. Therefore, these are important initiatives. Within the Mediterranean, we have, in the context of the declaration that was signed by the heads of state and government of the 9 European Union member states of the Mediterranean last year on the 17th of September, the importance of the Greek initiative was acknowledged, and the pilot project was launched to digitalize a monument per member state, so 9 monuments, with a methodology that is being developed by the Academy of Athens to somehow assess the current situation of the monument, the impacts, and develop vulnerability criteria. In Greece, we have undertaken a lot of initiatives within the National Adaptation Plan and the regional ones. There are actions foreseen to protect cultural heritage. The Ministry of Culture has developed some initiatives They have identified, you can see that on the screen, archaeological sites and museums that have to be upgraded energy-wise. The cultural sites and the monuments will have to be digitalized. They will be protected, and the whole scheme will be supported under the Recovery and Resilience Plan. These are extremely important initiatives that we need to develop. And of course, there is a pilot disaster risk management plan for World Heritage sites. Those are the sites of the UNESCO, because not all of our hundreds of sites are World Heritage sites. We are trying to broaden, of course, the scope of this initiative. So, to conclude this first presentation, I would like to say that we are very happy to join forces with you all. Copernicus has also, is a European program, but it has a worldwide scope. And we are very happy that we are joining forces with UFM. And I do believe that this application and this work will be beneficial also to other parts of the globe, not only to the Mediterranean, because we are establishing here good practice, and Greece wants to promote this best practice. We have a network of focal points. We have launched a questionnaire on the countries, on all the countries which support the initiative. We have received 31 replies up to now, which we are assessing. We will be able to share them soon with the countries that have replied, and through it we will be able to identify best practice criteria that, of course, we will share with the Union for the Mediterranean, with you, as we want in the future to introduce this precious scientific basis to all our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George, and thank you to emphasize again the importance of collaboration at international level to share knowledge and insights. So, let's move to Karina. Several UNESCO World Heritage sites across the low-lying coastal areas of the Mediterranean face the risk of floods, especially during extreme storm surges. What does science say on our understanding on sea level rise? And can you give us some insight on what it means for the Mediterranean Sea?
Thank you very much. So I will provide insights on the current observed sea level rise, the projected sea level rise, and also the physical drivers for the regional changes on sea level. I will start with a global scale picture which has been provided by the recent IPCC report on the Working Group 1 on the physical science basis. What do we observe today? So what we observe today, that at global scale, heating of the climate system has caused sea level rise through ice loss on land and thermal expansion from ocean warming. And the assessment also clearly provides insight that human influence was very likely the main driver of global mean sea level rise since at least the 1971. And since the 80s, global sea level rise accelerating. On the right-hand side, you can see again a distribution on the different contributors of sea level rise for a global scale for Antarctic ice sheets, Greenland ice sheets, glaciers, ocean thermal expansion, and land water storage change. So what do we expect in the future? According to the IPCC report and the different simulations, and which have used different choices we might take into the future. Beyond 2050, sea level projections are increasingly sensitive to emissions, and in the longer term, sea level is committed to rise for centuries to millennia. So what are we clearly expecting is that by 2100, about 0.6 to 0.9 meter under high emission scenarios, and about 0.3 to 0.6 under low emission scenarios, and by 2150, expectation from 1 to almost 2 meters under high emission scenarios, and between 0.5 to 1 meter under low emission scenarios. What is happening at regional scale? So for the sea level rise in the Mediterranean Sea, so at regional scale, there are different, a variety of processes which are driving regional sea level change. Those processes are linked, for example, to the changes in ocean currents and ocean winds, which are driving ocean currents and different patterns in the ocean, gravitational effects, which are moving water around, and the changes and uplift and going down of land gravitational effects, which can be either naturally driven, but they can also be human driven. So from this perspective, you have normally a map which we provide and update regularly as part of a Copernicus program on the regional sea level trend. So you have here an average of the sea level rise, and you can see all the messages provided before at global scale are downscaled also at this basin scale, because sea level in the Mediterranean Sea is rising at a similar rate as it is doing for the global ocean. And you can also see that at regional scale, as just mentioned for the different drivers, there are different aspects, but the entire Mediterranean Sea is showing also rise in regional sea level, which can go up to 8 millimeters per year. So, which is much above the global mean rise. So basin-wide sea level rise is comparable, right, as a global average, and the entire basin is affected. I just said this. So I just wanted to give a transition to the work which is done, collaboration. So this is work in terms of linking and assessing the hazard of sea level rise and future sea level rise to World Heritage sites located at coastal areas. So this is the work which has been done. I've put the author list here, and so the results show that today the majority of cultural World Heritage sites located in low-lying coastal areas of the Mediterranean area are at risk from 100-year flood and from coastal erosion, and that until 2100 the flood risk may increase by about 50% and erosion risk by about 13% across the regions, which showing that the majority of the risks will be affected by this long-term hazard change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karina, and it's very insightful to see what science-based data provides as proof. So the science is there, the facts are there, and the fact that it causes a real threat is really indicative. So let me now move to our last speaker, Carlo. And my question to you is, to better understand the future trends across the most exposed cultural heritage sites, there's a clear need for a pressing need for high quality and operational data. Can you please share us what and how the Copernicus Climate Change Service provides value in support of stakeholders and key players of cultural heritage in the area?
Thank you, Steen. Yes, certainly I can. And I would like to actually start while waiting for the slide to appear, and if they don't appear, it's not too much of a problem. I would like to pick up from what Grameno was saying in his introduction, that the data we have, and we have plenty, is often not immediately understandable or usable to inform context. And so we heard about the cultural heritage, we heard about the changing climate, and I'm a climate scientist myself. I'm a physicist by training, but for once in my life I will do a very dangerous thing, which is to make a step towards engineering. I know many colleagues will probably raise an eyebrow, because I think part of the problem is an engineering problem, and is about the transformation of the data into something that is directly usable, that makes sense in the specific context in which we are operating. Just to give you a flavor of that challenge, we provide data about the past, observation from the past, about the near present, and about the future. And by far our most popular data set is a data set that describes the past. And this data set is in the order of 10 petabytes. So it's complex from many points of view, but if you want just to pick one, the sheer size of the data is enormous. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the concept of kilo, tera, peta, mega, and so on. But just to make sense of it, the next generation of this product will be 50 petabytes or thereabout, And that's, if you were music rather than climate data, it would be enough music to play continuously for our existence on this planet as a Homo sapiens. So I think it's quite enormous as an amount of data. So how can we transform this data into something that makes sense? So this is the big challenge that we tackled. Oh, I have visual support now, which is even better. And we tackled with this concept that we call the climate data store, that transformed this petabyte of data on the one side to few kilobytes of usable information. So you can imagine the data sitting on this side, and here I've used a collection of what we call essential climate variable, of which sea level is one, but there are many other, 53 more. And we map those into something that makes sense. So to make George happy, no, I can't. Sorry, George. But oh yes, I can. There is a nice image of the Lion of Delos, the cultural heritage of which this basin is so rich of. And the exercise that we have taken, the road that we started walking together with the Union of the Mediterranean, is very much the walk through this proposition, from the petabyte of data into a nice and interactive application that maps the sea level in different places of the basin in the location, exactly as Karina has shown in that paper, following a methodology that has been published on Nature, actually, Nature Climate Change. It is possible to map this projection of sea level against this historical site and provide an assessment of the risk. So it's a combination of the sea level change and the vulnerability of the site, which is related to the orography of the site. But what is most important to me is not just the engineering aspect, but it's the contextualization. So it's no longer just data, it's no longer the climate data itself, is the data with the context, is the data with the history, with the location, and really an opportunity for us, as both all previous speakers have said, to make a step forward, because if this cultural heritage managed to reach us after thousands of years, I think we should do our best to ensure they have many more thousands of years ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Carlo, and it's clear that applications like this can provide added value to the region, and I invite everyone to play with the iPads which you find outside, and Carlo will also explain a little bit further on what this really means, so you get some guidance before you play with the data. Before we go to the next session, I would like to give the floor to Madame Sanz from UNESCO to share her views, and you can come to the podium.
Please, I'm very happy here. Huh?
The floor is yours.
Much. Thank you. Very, very kind of you, and I thank you all for making this happening, because in fact I was just informed this morning, but it's my pleasure to be here with you. I would like to tell you that I have just been appointed director of the Regional Office for Sciences for all the Arab region in Cairo, but I spent 16 years of my life within the context of the World Heritage Convention, so I am extremely happy, and I feel that I'm very well placed today in this discussion. Not just because we have all the solutions, but because some of the methodologies and some of your rationale, I think, is absolutely needed, urgent, and of course, my little speech or 2 or 3 ideas here is just to support your work, to underline how much do we really endorse all the propositions coming from you, from the coalition. So Council, the Executive Council of UNESCO is very engaged on that, and I think this is one of the last issues, thematic issues, but that has received much more importance and placed over the last 5 years at the Executive Council of UNESCO. I am not prepared to give a speech, but I would like to react and to add some comments of what you have already said. You discuss about the importance of trying to focus some of the actions on the World Heritage Site of UNESCO. But what I think is much more important is to understand in this context the spirit of the convention. There is only one paragraph within all this marvelous modern document that is related to the list of World Heritage. What I think is much more important in this kind of translation that you mentioned, in this kind of use of that, the full use of all this mechanism is not just for the World Heritage Site, it's just for all which is in the tentative list, and for many other sites that will not find never a site in the list. Because the most important substantial part of the World Heritage Convention is the Article 5. So one World Heritage Site needs to offer a domino effect to many other sites that are not going to be considered. This methodology is extraordinarily important, not just to assess the damages and the losses. I think this kind of tool is very important for us upstreaming before that the site is nominated, because we need to revise all kind of the conditions. It's not just because UNESCO is going to put the finger like that to a country and saying, you did not very well done your homework. No, the spirit of the convention is to use any kind of methodology and instrument to support the effort of a state party thanks to the international cooperation. So this is extremely important assessment, but beforehand. I think this is very, very important. Ireland. You mentioned islands as well. I think islands are extraordinarily important epicenters of diversity. And I don't know if you have seen the last pictures of the big fires in Easter Island. So the site has been extraordinary damage by fires. In the middle of the ocean, practically with no trees, so, and the risk is there. That makes me feel that islands needs to be like a hotspot. I invited to Egypt an artist that express its kind of creativity through the depiction of oasis. And they say, no, an oasis is not just an historical picture of an oasis. An oasis should be an island for the future. So I think that the Mediterranean area is very, very promising on that. We are part, in Egypt, we are part of the Mediterranean family. And perhaps putting forward one of the most important in terms of culture, in terms of nature, but in terms of difficulty and struggle vis-à-vis the climate change. We are living very close of the biggest delta ever in the Mediterranean area. So the Nile Delta is an extremely important hotspot. Hotspot because it's an accumulation of richness, it's an accumulation of history, it's an accumulation of diversity. And when I'm saying diversity, I'm saying cultural, natural, linguistic, genetic diversity of food. It has been mentioned here as well. I have the feeling that looking at the Mediterranean area and beyond this worry about all the coastal area, I think it's very interesting to focus as well our intention on deltas. Po, Turia, Nile. But when we say Nile with a big responsibility according to the site of and the commitment of this government, of course, with the Nile. I have the feeling that it could be very, very important to put together many kind of knowledges to try to put into practice climate services. Our kind of engineering memory is short, even if we have enormous amount of data. And in our case, we are trying to supply this gap, taking into consideration all the memories of sites and all the feelings and perception, not about climate variation, but really climate change in terms of cycles. And for this, I invite as well you on the 17th that there is a FAO UNESCO WMO initiative how to better assess all of the perception of from local knowledge about the climate change and how this is important in terms of a substantial knowledge that has been abandoned, neglected in all of our, let's say, merging together any kind of knowledge that we have about climate. I think it seems to me that it is as well important. Coastal areas. From the 50 marine sites of UNESCO, we have some of them very important in the Mediterranean. Even sometimes, and it's very useful to know, that some of the natural and cultural sites, which is very, very rare to have mixed sites, some of them are in the Mediterranean area, and some of them are affected by climate change. I'm speaking about Ibiza, and the Poseidonia in Ibiza, and many other areas. So I think it's time as well to go through the subnational level of authority, mayors in the Mediterranean area. I think that could be a very important support. And of course, my last comment is just for you to know that in terms of greening, we are trying to green beaches, of course, but we are greening museums. So this is a country of some of the most outstanding museums. So how to change the culture, as it was referred first, how to change the culture, our attitude as a client, as a participant. We are trying to do that with some of the museums, very big museums. It's a very big engagement of the government of Egypt. And it will be my pleasure to meet you again and to show you already the results of these greening museums and cultural institutions starting from Egypt. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these insights. And even for a Northern European like me, the reference to the Nile, it speaks. And thank you for your interventions. Okay, let's move to the last before we go for questions and answers. And I'm sure that you have several questions for the panel. I would like to give the floor again to Carlo to give some insights in what exactly you see at the front on this application. So, Carlo.
I hope it works. Because my ability to describe a live app without visual support is somehow limited. So the video. Next, the video of the app. You will see this video out there, and they are on the iPad as well. So I'm not trying to cut short any of our video. They're really interesting. But I don't think the video necessarily work well when we have the real people on the panel. So I suggest you to listen to the video outside. What I wanted to show to you is somehow how the app works. Then you can play with it yourself. The idea is that it's a very simple interactive web-based app where you can select a site. And do we have it? Don't worry, Nuria, don't worry. Let's leave it like that. I describe it and then they play outside. I think it's easy. So basically what you find there is a map, a map of the Mediterranean with overimposed a map of the sea level projected for the future, and there are the archaeological site. When you click on a specific archaeological site, then there is a pop-up, and these pop-ups provide additional information, provide a description of the site, so that's the context I was talking about, a picture of the site, a bit of history of the site, a map with different scenarios, so the current 1 in a 100-year event in terms of flooding, the same kind of event with one emission scenario and another, just to have an idea of how this may change, but also a reconstruction of how much the sea level has changed in that location over the historical period. So you have all the context of the information as well as the data that both Gramenos and George. Oh, we have it. Very good. So this, the color map is the 1 in 100 years extreme event in terms of meters of flooding, and this is a combination of a change in the sea level and the effect of possible surges. And what you have there are the lowest and the maximum estimation for future scenario in terms of sea level. So current climate and to future climate. This is the description of the site. Then you can just select those sites that are ranked as being particularly vulnerable, or those that are very vulnerable, or those that are less vulnerable. These are the histogram provided the future projections, and underneath you see a map with the description. This map with the description of the historical sea level over that site. So that's how it looks like. Very simple and very easy to use. So just to conclude, 2 important elements. All the data behind this app are publicly available, free of charge. Anyone can use them as they wish. What is interesting is also the code, the software, the code that has been used to put together the app is open source, so you can see what has been done. So in a sense, if you want to attach any sense of judgment or criticism or review, everything is in the open. And that, for me, is one of the key elements. So we need to have an engaging interface. We need to put the information we have in the sectorial context, in the cultural heritage context in this case. But we also need to maintain the full traceability of all we do back to the original data and through tools that are open to scrutiny. So I can only invite you to play with the app, and well, if you want to develop your own app in the future, or let us know how we can improve on what we have. Thank you very much.
All right, now you. All right, so I think we come to the end of the panel and this session, and I would like to use the remaining time for you to ask questions.
Stin, can I say something
of course.
Before the questions? First of all, I was very happy to hear Nuria. UNESCO is a key member of the flexible mechanism that we have established at the United Nations level with the support of the Secretary General Guterres. So we have UNESCO, we have the World Meteorological Organization and UNFCCC, and we are developing all these initiatives. Now we will be very happy to benefit from this application, and I will share this practice across the network that we have established in all 100 countries. I would like to add, as Nuria is a World Heritage expert, that for the management plans that we need for the World Heritage sites, the tool needs now to apply. It should apply from the very beginning, but it was not available. We will apply it for the next monuments which are eligible to be part of the World Heritage site, and in that respect, I would like to let you know that we in Greece are supporting the initiative of Odessa to have its cultural center with the prominent monuments which are there protected under the World Heritage site. We have undertaken initiatives both at the level of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also at the level of our initiative. Our initiative is on climate threats, but we need to add the war threats. So probably we need to broaden it, because from the war threats, important monuments in Iraq, for example, or in other parts of the globe were destroyed, and there was also cultural terrorism in those countries which has led to the destruction. So once again, this is extremely important. Of course, we will be very happy to monitor this with you, and to invite you in an event that we are organizing in Greece, Circle the Med, how we can turn the Mediterranean into a circular region and have in the cultural panel the application presented, because I do believe that the added value is very high. Sorry for this intervention. I believe now the floor is for the audience.
Okay. Thank you, George. So, who has a question?
So thank you very much. I'm not working in the Mediterranean Sea, but I am Mediterranean. So I want to thank all the people that exposed their ideas, but I'm asking to the scientists now what is really important now in the Mediterranean Sea. So we have data, we have beta time of data, but they are not so precise. And we need, at the level of the nations, more precise data to really tackle adaptation, not only mitigation. So what is your outcome on that? What do parties need to do?
No, it's done. Good. Thank you for touching on this point, because I think it's somehow the flip side of what I was saying before. Observation are no longer only needed for the science, they are needed by society. So for me, if anything, we need to extend our support for observation. And I don't know how much this could be achieved within this COP, but maybe some in this direction may be achieved even within this COP, to really stress out, saying very loudly that we need to keep investing in observation, not only keep investing to maintain the existing network, that especially in many developing countries have been deteriorating over time. So tomorrow there is an event for the systematic observation financial mechanism, SOFT, of the WMO. That's really important. But alongside those, we need to invest to expand the observational network. Because as you were saying, we have data for the Mediterranean, but there are many things that are not yet fully observed or well enough observed, not only for understanding the cycle of water, energy and carbon, but because now that information is needed to inform our decision, to decide which side to protect how, to decide which areas are nowadays compromised. We may face some tough decision in the future, and how can we base the decision if we don't have the right observation in place? So I thank you for the question, because I think this is really an important point.
So I have a really generic question, but I would love to hear your opinion around what's your personal expectation of the COP, and how would you consider it as a success, a successful event? How do you see it? What kind of output you expect it to come up with so that it is considered a success?
First of all, I would like the COP, and we are very happy to be here in Egypt. By the way, I was born in Alexandria, Egypt, so I'm happy to be here. I would expect the COP to acknowledge that we have to mainstream culture in climate action. It is extremely important because the environment is mainstreamed through biodiversity, through green infrastructures, ecosystem services. And of course, the quality of the environment influences the climate and vice versa. So these are interrelated. But culture, in the broad sense, needs to be mainstreamed in climate action. And for me, this is a very important finding that we need to acknowledge. The second thing, I would be really very happy to have the application acknowledged somewhere, because this is a global tool. And Egypt, as the host country, has a strong interest in referring to it, thanks to the Union for the Mediterranean as well. But this tool can be developed worldwide. And frankly speaking, we need it. Because I will tell you something, I was in Delos. The water is already, this is the zero ground island. The water is already inside the archaeological site. And we have seen the projections up to 2 meters scenarios. In such a case, the site will be flooded. Added to this, the extreme weather phenomena, tsunamis coming from the sea, floods because of very strong rainfalls that also move sediments to the sea. So you have erosion, you have floods, and these are situations that we have already faced in Greece. In Crete, for example, we had a very targeted storm on a seaside which had disastrous effects. I mean, Petros was there. It never happened in the past. So we are really facing that, and I do believe that the war and the energy crisis, and this is a very strong conclusion that I would like us to have in the conclusions of the COP, should not influence the energy transition and our target for climate neutrality by 2050. Not everybody has the same target, I know that, but we in the European Union and UFM were sharing this ambitious target, and we will do our best to support all the countries worldwide to be able to join us in reaching this ambitious target. Thank you very much for your question, which was a more global question.
We have another question.
Hi, I was want to ask about the website, the references and the dynamics that control the website. I just want to know about them, and is that only specified only for the Mediterranean countries, or it's worldwide for each and every place? Because already we have a website called En-ROADS. It works the same, but it's globally about the creating scenarios for the climate change and decreasing the temperature. And they have a lot of references. So do we have the same or not?
Can you introduce yourself?
Okay. I'm sorry. My name is Sarah Norman. I'm a climate ambassador in Climate Interactive in partnership with MIT and New Venture Fund. I'm also a lecturer assistant in MSA University in Egypt. I'm a PhD student in environmental interior architecture.
Thank you. Thank you for.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll try to answer it. For some of the technical detail on the website.
I'm sorry for the technicalities, but
I may defer to
Okay.
colleagues of mine. I'll do my best, and then we'll take it from there. On the second part of the question, so about the geographical spread. At the moment, the app only covers the Mediterranean, so it was developed specifically for the Union of the Mediterranean with Gramenus, and that was to reach COP with something concrete. But the methodology, as George was saying, the methodology behind that is published and available, well, can be applied anywhere. So for me, it's almost more important the process that we follow than the result. We can discuss about how to improve it, how to enlarge the scope, and so on. But the other element that is partly related to the first part of your question is the fact that the idea is, or the power of this approach is to keep interrogating fresh data. So, the idea that the data behind, for instance, the sea level, will be updated, right? And when new projection will come, they will be updated. And having a software that runs on a cloud that picks up those data dynamically and plot it, I think adds value to the approach. So is a dynamic, as we have done it for other applications. So this is what you see is the output of a script written in sort of pseudo Python. At the moment, I'm not sure it's picking up the feed. That's right. That's right. So typically we have two. Right. Right. So typically, for our data set, we update twice a year the sea level. but it's something that we are responsive to the comment of the user about. So if should you want a higher frequency of update, this can be discussed.
Thank you.
So my name is also Sarah, and then I'm also a PhD student. I'm planning to do a research to link finance with climate action. And finance not only about funding for me, it's about mandating that companies report on their environmental impact. I'm associated with an Egyptian organization here in Egypt. It's called EnviroX. So I'm trying to observe. Thank you.
Okay, is there another question? No? Yes.
Well, listening to you, I was thinking, let us stop more underwater heritage happen. This is our big challenge. So, and it's not too fast, even in the Mediterranean area. But if you have a look to everything that is happening in the very little island in the Pacific Ocean, it's critical. So I have the feeling that even if the Mediterranean is the epicenter of this geography, it could be very interesting to make the comparison and to learn from there. The Mediterranean Sea is one of the most important containers of archaeological heritage underwater. But the slogan could be not more archaeological underwater heritage. I think this is extremely essential. We are very well prepared. We have a wonderful convention, but it's not the case to use for very dramatic issues that we are facing nowadays. I think this is extraordinarily important. The second issue that I would like to say, when you think about what is the level of your ambition, my ambition is to go to COP28 and to have two special pavilions. One on cultures in plural, okay? So the cultures of climate change. It did not happen. So how many anthropologists are assisting to the COP27? I think social science is extraordinarily important and is not well represented. And another ambition, another big pavilion for education. We are not going to go very fast if we have not trust on education as an accelerator to face climate change. And this is something that happened. You go everywhere. Education is here and there, but we need to call the effort by the proper name. So education needs a pavilion in the COP28, and this is an universal effort, and I think without that, it's not possible to go ahead. Do you know how many national systems of education include one single page of climate change in the curricula, in a page of a book? The 50% has nothing. Do you know how many children have declared that they cannot explain climate change? 70%. It's not possible. It's not possible. So we are in a wonderful country. This is Mediterranean country. This is an Arab country, and this is an African country. And I have the feeling that absolutely it is a big role here, and we need to project from Egypt our ambition. So these are the two important ambitions, and our ambitions of UNESCO. And thank you.
Okay. We have one final question, and after this question, I would like to invite you for a cocktail, and we need to close this because people need to prepare also for the next session. So there's one final question, and Karina also would like to share some closing remarks.
Hi everyone, sorry, I'll make this really quick. My name is Angelica, and I am a Greek-Australian youth advocate and social entrepreneur. And I would like to ask the panel, we've talked a lot about the scientific impact, here today, but I really liked, Yorgo, what you said about the fact that culture is not just monuments, it's actually traditions as well. And I'd like to think about how can we preserve these traditions when if some of these islands like Delos, as you were saying, which all of them have different cultures and they speak different dialects as well, how can we preserve these cultural traditions when perhaps we may have climate refugees from our own countries as well?
This would deserve a dedicated panel. No, what I say, and I make the link with what Nuria has said, this is linked to education. And this is linked to preserving the cultural heritage in the broad sense, the customs, τα ήθη και τα έθιμα, as you are a Greek-speaking person as well, because the cultures are linked to the way people are living, and we need to preserve that. And in Australia, you have a lot of autochthones, which live in a certain way. They know much better the environment than we living in the mega cities. So we need really to preserve these cultures and start from there, because these people feel the earth. They can listen to the earth. Also the people living in the Amazon forest. Therefore, it is very important to link this with education, awareness raising, go to schools, and promote all this, let's say, new culture related to the protection of climate. Because if each of us reduces his or her climate footprint, which is reducing the energy footprint, the environmental footprint, and behave as a citizen who is aware of the challenges, then we will be able to build a better world.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to bring one comment here while the discussion that comes into my head. So we are addressing a topic of societal, traditional, and cultural memory, right? And which is in phase or in front of the climate memory. Sea level is an integrator of climate memory. Sea level, it's, for example, part of the change of ice sheets, which are irreversible, the loss we have today. So it's a long-term process, a committed process for centuries to millennia. And the second part for sea level rise is ocean warming, deep ocean warming. It's another actor, climate memory, which is a commitment for centuries to millennia. So this climate memory, as represented with sea level rise, is for a committed change for the next 2,000 years or longer. And what has IPCC said for the next 2,000 years? If we limit warming to 1.5 degrees, the committed sea level change will be 2 to 3 meters. If it will be 2 degrees, it will be 2 to 6 meters. And if it will be 5 degrees, we are going up to 19 to 22 meters. So that's my point.
I know we are running out of time, but just what you said just triggered a thought in my mind, that this will be our legacy, for sure. And it will be our cultural legacy, in a sense. This committed warming, the committed sea level rise. So I think I take the point of the culture, the climate culture and the education, because there is also another legacy that we want to have beyond the one that we will have anyway. Thank you.
I know we are running out of time and I'm responsible for this machine to work, but I could not miss answering the young lady question. You work in business?
Yes, I'm a social entrepreneur.
Okay, but money is important also for social companies. So let me give you 3 ideas to make money. If you go along the Silk Road, you will find some cone-shaped building called the Yakchal. In Persian, it means the fridge. They were used by merchants to deposit perishable goods, and they have a characteristics. Even if outside is 55 degrees, inside it's always between 0 and -4. Electricity expenditure, 0. If you go towards the Arabian Peninsula, you get into the houses, the traditional houses. Suddenly you find yourself with a temperature which is wonderful. They even make ice in the basement. They channel the wind, make it pass underneath, and it produces ice, and the temperature, which is magically exactly the temperature that human physiology needs. Go again to Persia, but it has been taken from the Persians to the Arabs, and it arrived in my country, in the southern part of it, in Sicily. There is something called the Qanat. The Qanat is a methodology that you could describe in dunes, you know, the famous, it's a channel that you dig under the sand of the deserts. Every 150 meters you have a well that connects the channel to the surface. This well captures humidity from the air at night. It trickles inside the channel, and after 600 meters is more or less like a river, and the Persians made gardens in the desert out of this. Cultural heritage. Let me pass this message, because for me it's more important than anything we said so far, is safety, because it's not the fantastic knowledge that we developed 20 years ago, but it's thousands of years of wisdom, and it's money. Thank you.
Thank you for these wise words. So before we go out for the cocktail, and I invite you all, we will take a group picture, and then I think we are ready with this session. Thank you for the very lively discussions. Really great.